So let's talk about the TX-6. There's the newest firmware 1.2.12, which I learned about from Chordmaster. That's Chordmaster with a K on YouTube. I'll put a link to his channel in the description. He basically turned me on to the fact that there is sample and loop features in this new release. And I have to admit, I got really excited about that because it would be amazing if I could sample and maybe even create loops in the TX-6 directly. But I have to admit, after trying it, I think these two features, particularly loop, fit into features which you can actually do on the TX-6, but you probably shouldn't. I just don't think it's necessarily the best place to do it, and you'll see why. I think sample a little better than loop. So let's get into it. It's very straightforward. So in sample, you get to it, and loop, you actually get to it the same way. You hit Shift and the button to get to the system menu, and you look for sample, and you click the button again, and now you're in sample mode. And there are two modes within sample mode, and you get to those with the two FX buttons. The first FX button is for playing samples, and you're default in that mode when you get into the mode there. Or the second button is for recording. And when you press the second button, it gives you options. The first is what's the source of your recording, and we're going to use source 1, which is my Roland T8 right next to it over there. And the next option is which sample are you going to go into, and you basically choose the sample slot. There are 6 slots for the 6 channels. Each slot can hold a sample of 5.5 seconds, and you choose there, and it gives you an indicator on the screen which sample slot. So we're going to go into sample slot 1 to start. I've got my Roland T8 on the bass sound, which I really love, so I'm going to sample that. Let's get into keyboard mode. I'll turn my effects on the T8 off so there's no delay. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sample that. Now, I have to play with one hand because the same shortcoming that we've got in the EP133, the KO2, is on the TX-6 sample as well, which is you have to hold the button. That's the only way to sample, is hold down the button. There is no threshold sampling where it waits for an audio signal and plays until you turn it off. So don't try to sample piano, two-handed piano or guitar. It just not the right device for this. So I'm going to sample this. Let's just do a simple pattern. You ready? Let's go. And now I've got a sample in there. If I go into play mode and I press the button, there's my sample, and now I have 3 options to edit that sample when I'm in play mode. First is, and it's highlighted to start, the 100% is the pitch. If I turn it up, it goes up to 200%, or down. And I don't think I would necessarily use that, especially since it's in percentage terms. I don't think I love that. But it's there. And the next thing is the start point. I can change the start point. I can turn this when the little dot at the start of the waveform is blinking. And I think I started this one pretty good, so I'm going to leave it. And now I've got that sample. Now let's do another sample, and the way to do that is I get into record mode again, and I leave the source at 1, but I use the second button, and this one I'll do a little different. I'll do. And now I've got that second sample. Let's go into play mode and play those 2 samples. This one has a little bit of a delay in the beginning, so I can go to the start point and change that. And there we go. Nice. So I've got a couple of samples, and that's wonderful. That's really it. I can put 6 samples in these 6 slots, 5.5 seconds each. If I had a USB card plugged in, I could save it by doing Shift and this second FX button. It's telling me I have no disk, so it's not going to save it. Otherwise, you lose it when you turn it off. So these samples are ephemeral. They go away. Now, let's go into Looper. I think the sampler is something that in a pinch, maybe I would use it. I would capture a little bit of a sequence. The only problem I have with sample, and the same problem with loop, is you can see when I'm in record mode, the source can be any one channel. That's it. Now, this is a mixer with many channels in, and that's what I love about it. Why I can't sample the whole mix, I just don't get. And it's the same with loop. I cannot loop the whole mix. So that's very surprising to me. Now to get to Looper, it's the same thing. We hit Shift and press the button, and we go to Loop and press the button again, and now we're in Looper. And there are a couple of modes in Looper as well. First, I want to select which source, what I'm recording from, and again, only one source at a time. If I press the button again, it will give me the start and end of the loop that I can change, and if I press the button the third time, it'll let me change the timing, and you'll see what that's like once we record something. Now, again, I hold FX2. It's only one loop. It can be 22 seconds long, but it's only one loop. So I hold FX2 and then I record my loop. So I will record a loop that's something like this again. I'm just going to go for it. You ready? And when I let go, it just starts playing. Now I can change the timing at half, a quarter, or an eighth. And I can change the start point. And if I want to stop it from playing, I press this bottom button again, the FX2. There's a bit of a trick here with the sequence of buttons. When I start playing the loop, the first button is used, and it's got a re-trigger capability, so I can see why when I hit it, it just keeps re-triggering. That's fine. So it's not a toggle. It's not a toggle to start and stop. The stop is actually the second FX button. So I start it, and then I stop it. Or I start it and re-trigger it. Now the problem is, if by mistake I hit the second button when it's already stopped, I will actually erase the loop because it thinks I'm recording something. So I click it once and boom, the whole waveform is gone. I just lost my loop. Unfortunate, but this loop is one loop, 22 seconds long. It can only do, again, from one channel, not from all, and I tested that. It will not record multiple channels, and that's unfortunate. But again, I think loop in particular is a function I would not use on the TX-6. I just don't see a reason why I would ever use that. If it did the whole mix, I probably would. I could imagine wanting to, in performance and things, you could actually loop a part of the performance with the mix coming in, but I otherwise can't see trying to capture input from one channel and looping it if it's just a single loop. On sample, maybe I would. Maybe I would do some things with sample. I'm not sure if I would. But that is it. That is the capability. And again, loops and samples can be saved. And you can see that in the manual, saving samples and loops. You need a USB for that. That's the only way to save. So I hope this was somewhat useful. It was a little bit of discovery to figure out the limitations and how to use it. And you know, I have to say it's good that Teenage Engineering is releasing new firmware, that they're trying sample and loop, and that they released, I'll call it an MVP. Min viable product that is at least a starting point, but hopefully they will go the next level and not leave this hanging in its current form, because I think it's got some shortcomings.